Jake here with Action for Liberty. Thank you for tuning into our show where we expose corrupt politicians and lying corporate media. Today we're going to be talking about abortion. Ooh, how dare we talk about that? You're not supposed to talk about that on the right. Well, we are, because I think you're going to learn that there's actually a much more extreme position than what the left and the corporate media wants you to believe is the position of most Republicans. And we're going to talk about that with Noah Spencer, our big Viking from California. How you doing, Noah?
Doing great. Happy to be back. Just came back from the land of communists and baby killers, so
yeah,
it's good to be back.
And the horrible governor that our governor tried to emulate many times.
Yeah, it's like it's walls on steroids.
Yeah. And you're from like rural California, right? Like northern?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like in the Central Valley, so I'm like an hour and a half out of San Francisco, but for all intents and purposes, we're conservative. My rep, it was one of three to vote against, the legislation that passed there. We're conservative.
You're saying there's only three representatives in the whole assembly? It's assembly, right?
Yeah, the whole state assembly.
There's only three that voted against it?
Yes, there's only three that voted against it, and mine was one of them.
All right. I didn't even look at the vote. Honestly, I just knew it passed.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get into that in a second. Joining us in the control room is none other than Bridget. Bridget, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Loving the red back here.
It looks more pink from my angle.
Well.
I thought Dawson was the one that chose the color. Dawson running the dials. Bridget reading your comments at any point if you want to weigh into the show. We're actually going to put a phone number eventually so you can call in and be a part of the show. I'm going to have a person from California who's with Life Legal Defense Fund join us in our conversation. Is she on Zoom already? Okay, we're going to bring her in just a couple minutes. First of all, I want to bring up how Republicans are handling the abortion issue. Now, let's just back up real quick because maybe people will watch this in the future. Roe v. Wade gets overturned this last summer. There was a leak even before that, which who knows how that leak happened, but that this was coming down. And eventually Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and the Democrats are like, finally, this terrible election cycle for us because of out-of-control inflation, out-of-control crime, and we got our issue. It's abortion. And the Republicans, they're the extremists. That is the whole idea of the Democrat Party, is that they're going to win on this issue, so much that they're just gaslighting the country on this. And poll after poll shows that abortion is not the top issue on the plate. But leave it to the Minnesota GOP, the Republican Party of Minnesota, to continually screw things up. Now, I'm very optimistic. I think they're actually going to make some big wins here in the state of Minnesota, despite the stupidity from the chairman here and from the just typical political consultants who continuously lose to the Democrats. So they're so fearful of this issue that they actually put out these really wacky talking points. And we broke the story because we had multiple people send it to us. So pull up that article here real quick there, Dawson. You go to actionforliberty.com. You can look this up yourself. We put the actual memo, which was in an email from David Hann, the MNGOP chair, and scroll down here to where it actually shows the confidential email. First of all, confidential email, what's he talking about? This is like something sent to like every candidate in the state. So like you're not going to keep this very confidential. Scroll down just a little bit more there, Dawson. This is the actual memo. And what David Hann writes, I don't know why my screen here, Dawson, it looks like it's like, there you go. Bring it back to left a little bit. There you go. Perfect. He says, it's about that fourth paragraph. And by the way, if you look in the Bolden part, he says this is from state party and key stakeholders. They've developed and tested the following talking points. So it's the official MNGOP talking point. And he writes, quote, "Here are the facts. Abortion up to the moment of birth is a protected constitutional right in Minnesota." We did a control find for abortion. Did you know this?
I wasn't aware that we done the testing to see what messages really resonated and what was the statement we wanted to go with. But I also wasn't aware apparently that it's a constitutional right in Minnesota.
I'm shocked. I don't see abortion at all in the Constitution in Minnesota, and how on earth could that be a constitutionally protected right? First of all, the rights come from God. The Constitution just protects those rights. That's an extreme position according to MSNBC these days, even though that is our founding of our country. And I'm pretty sure God, if I could weigh in on this, wouldn't want abortion to be protected, a constitutional protection right. But there's no mention of abortion in our Constitution. It's a falsehood. It's not at all true.
Extreme and moderate are meaningless terms. They're entirely relative to the people in the room. And let's just look at it on, like you said, I know that's a bit extreme to say. In a lot of the media these days, they're literally censoring the word God. They're putting G apostrophe or some other symbol in the middle D, like it's a swear word. The thing that's on our money, that was the founding principles that were shared by our founders, it's a swear word now. That's that's the shifting tide that we're in.
Well, I think what's more important is that talking point, because it's not the first time we've heard this talking point. That talking point comes from the left. It's from the Democrats, that it's a constitutionally protected right. It is not. The courts, far left justices in the Minnesota Supreme Court have equated it to a right. It doesn't mean it's a right. It's not at all right. It's these, and then, of course, what they'll say is Roe v. Wade. Oh, they threw out the Constitution. And really, Roe v. Wade is a very smart legal move here. It just says that this is not something the federal government should weigh in on, and why would they? It's not in the U.S. Constitution. It's also not in the state constitution. So what he's doing is basically accepting the talking points of the extreme left. Now you see a bunch of candidates, they're walking away from, the exemptions of rape and incest, or I should say, they used to say 100% pro-life, but then cases of rape and incest, they walk away from that. And it's all because, the MNGOP is testing these talking points because they're so fearful of losing on this issue. And we're going to dive into that after we have our guest here, because I think the most extreme position is the position of the Democrats. And so to talk about that, we got to go to what they even think in the most extreme cases. And so it's so interesting to me, people talk about Minnesota, it's this Democrat state. It's like, I got two Californians on the show today. Like, you guys are like, Minnesota looks pretty good. Didn't you come here and think you were seeking refuge?
I tell people all the time I'm a refugee of communism in California, and I've built up a tolerance so I can withstand Tim Walz's socialism a little better than a lot of people, because I've baked in the oven of communism. And it's like you were saying earlier, like they were so happy to get this wedge issue, the Democrats were. And it's hilarious, but also sad to see cowards like David Hahn try to backpedal on the abortion issue and making public posts about it, when even in California, they're using the same exact template against that gubernatorial candidate as they are here. And that's all. They're extreme. They're pro-life. They want to stop life-saving research. And it doesn't matter how much you backpedal. You're never going to win the favor of your enemies. So stop trying.
California apparently is legalizing infanticide. Could this be true? Joining us today is Catherine Short, the Chief Legal Officer of the Life Legal Defense Fund, which is based out of California. How you doing today, Catherine?
Fine, thank you.
So do I have this right? Does this new law in California allow infanticide? Can we kill babies that are already born?
Yes, it does. I guess you would say it works two ways. One is by directly relieving criminal penalties for certain actions or inactions for newborns, what they call perinatal deaths. And the second way is simply by making it really, really dangerous for authorities to investigate. A coroner's report investigating the cause of the death of a newborn child cannot be used in the prosecution. It actually puts civil penalties on state, whether it's police or investigators who would investigate the cause of a death of a newborn. So it is to say, what it doesn't do directly, it does indirectly by making it so that these deaths would not be investigated.
See, I see a wide-ranging definition of what perinatal means. So what does it mean to someone in the legal profession in California?
Well, that's one of the problems with the law. It's vague in itself. I mean, some definitions of perinatal, and the perinatal is not defined in the law. So you're left to the range of from like 7 days to 28 days in various textbooks and authorities.
Well, I mean, like, when does life begin? That's the big question. And apparently 28 days after birth, life hasn't begun yet. Is that an assumption we can make here with this new law?
Well, I think the problem is what the Democrats in the legislature are trying to accomplish by this is to create a shield, an umbrella for women to be able to decide to end the life of the baby in their womb at any time. And if that includes that there might be let's say a botched abortion, I would, I don't like to say an unsuccessful abortion, but an abortion that does not result in the death of the baby at the time and the baby is born alive, then, well, golly, just her bad luck that she didn't manage to get the baby killed before it was born. And so they want to protect that choice as well. That the baby would receive no care, the baby would, basically have no rights because it was intended to die in the womb.
And
right. Oh,
that was the exact thing that they've been prepping us for with Virginia. Before Youngkin got elected, the man before him was on the radio saying, if the baby's born, we'll have a conversation with the mother, we'll make the baby comfortable, and then we'll talk about our options.
Yeah.
They've been prepping us for the idea of killing babies post-birth for several years now. And now they're just trying to act on it now that Virginia's a Republican governorship, they have to start launching these plans in California because it's the only feasible place.
And that's a good point, because that's how the left operates, is they move that Overton window so far out. In the case of like the Green New Deal, when that first got brought up, it was like such an extreme position. Oh, AOC's out of her mind, which is true. That's a fact. But in this case, it's like now the Green New Deal is being incorporated in states like Minnesota. Like we're basically Tim Walz is trying to mandate the same policies that are happening in California in the year 2035, something like that. It's ridiculous.
The Senate just met about that yesterday, the green card mandates.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they're only going to be able to go into effect for about a year. 2025 is when we're going to have to reconvene about the issue, and it could get more extreme at that point. Just progressively getting worse.
You guys are in danger when your legislature meets. Dawson, pull up the actual language of the bill, and I want to go through this with you, Katie. Katie, do you go by Katie or Catherine? What's the...
Katie.
You like Katie? All right, gotcha. Pull up the language. Do you have that, Dawson, handy? I see him scrambling. Oh, there it is. Can you zoom in? So this is actually, I went through a couple of the versions of the law because I saw the people defending the law basically saying, well, that was the way it was originally written. It was mistaken. It was updated. And if you see there, about 2/3 of the way down, Dawson, I think it says 123497 or something like that. What they're talking, yep, exactly, that highlighted area. They added the language there at the end, death due to what does that say? Causes that occurred in utero. So it says perinatal, and they added that. So are you familiar with these versions of the law? And then when that was added, Katie?
Yes, somewhat. That was an attempt to, because incredibly, they felt enough pressure from the way the law had originally been written to feel that they needed to change it a little, qualify it a little. And that was the attempt to diffuse the infanticide argument that the deaths from a cause in utero.
So the original language is like basically anything. I know it's hard because there's no real common definition of perinatal, but it didn't even say as caused in utero. So in other words, you could literally kill a baby and not be prosecuted. Right? You come from the legal profession. Is that how most people would interpret that law?
Yeah, I know. I think that's exactly right. And I mean, I think one earlier version, they actually changed it a couple times, said something like from a pregnancy related cause. And then it was pointed out, well, some women suffer from postpartum depression, which is a pregnancy related cause.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep. So would you say, oh, okay, a woman who kills her baby in a fit of postpartum depression, well, she gets the pass too then. But I do think, can I just go back for a moment to your point about taking the extreme and making it mainstream? I think that is really an important point in this bill, which is that because of the focus on infanticide, so much else that is wrong with this bill is being ignored, which is that it takes away any sort of punishment for a woman having an abortion. Basically she can do anything she's entitled, as the bill says. Basically she has a right to any pregnancy outcome, and that she has a right to the assistance of anyone else in achieving that pregnancy outcome. So there is no such thing anymore as an illegal abortion in California. And what would have been an illegal abortion is simply a woman choosing to use a non-medical professional to assist her in achieving this pregnancy outcome.
I mean, wasn't one of the initial reasonings they used for this legislation was, like you were saying, postpartum depression. And it wasn't even necessarily them killing their baby. It was the tragedy of them letting their babies starve to death because they don't have any ability to get up and function. And so they use something that is a genuine tragedy that we should have sympathy for, a woman that's just bereaved and can't take care of her child, and they use that as a band-aid cover for straight up infanticide, and they use the guilt.
Right. I think that's exactly correct. And you know, the particular tragedies that were the direct inspiration for this bill had to do with two women who were meth addicts, and their babies were stillborn. And I mean, and this was not the first time for either one of them. They had each of them had multiple pregnancies. One of them had multiple children taken away from her because of her addiction and her inability to take care of her children. And then in the particular case, the baby did not survive and died in utero, was stillborn because of the meth addiction. And those are, you know, those are tragic cases. And but they are, frankly, neither in those cases nor in, well, those cases are used as a reason to say, well, we won't do anything then. Basically, we can't risk that this woman will be in any way punished for her behavior, so we will just ignore that behavior and let it happen again and again. And then we take that as the excuse to create this shield of liability for not just reckless acts or negligent acts or acts done in the throes of an addiction, but for deliberate acts as well.
Yeah, I want to expand on that. So, Dawson, pull up the LA Times. So we did the research on this, and it seems like the author of the bill, that was the intent, was these two stories of women that had stillborn babies that were tested positive for meth. One who was actually prosecuted for it for involuntary manslaughter, which I think probably actually makes sense in that case. So this is, you know, the far right LA Times here. So, yeah, they talk about this. What's her name here? I'm having trouble reading the screen. Eldora Perez? Is that
Perez,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. So she basically was told by her lawyers to plead to, instead of first-degree murder, plead to voluntary manslaughter. And she was sentenced in 2018. I think she's out now, and that was appealed. But this is the intent of law, and then it just begs the question. You know, if you have a child in your care and you are hopped up on meth and that child dies, is that not criminal negligence?
And that's exactly what this law is meant to make sure that the answer is absolutely not. You know, in other words, hey, it's her body, in effect, that's what they're saying is, you know, it's her body, and anything that goes on in her body is her business and nobody else's business.
Yeah, that's why I find the position of the Democrats so evil these days, because it's like they say it's reproductive rights. This is women's rights. That's all you hear from them. And in this case, the baby, be damned. This is a human life. So once again, what is this extreme position? The Republicans who think life begins at conception, and then they want to go on that and like, oh, no exemptions for rape or incest. Of course, once you agree that a life begins, there should be no exemptions, right? Other than maybe a mother's life at risk. And that's such a rare, I don't even know if that is the case these days, to be honest with you. The Democrats' position is you can kill a 7-pound baby at full term that could be born any day. And if you were negligent in the womb and used meth and that baby is killed because of that, is stillborn, you can't be prosecuted. And that seems to be what she's arguing is the intent of the law. What am I missing here?
No, I mean, no, that you've got it exactly right. That is exactly right, because again, they are so concerned that that there be the slightest encroachment on the right of a woman, you know, to have control her own body. That whether that is through, you know, deliberate acts of seeking out an abortion, as I said, she can enlist anybody she wants to help her have an abortion, and this new law protects both her and the other person, and it is it's just such an extreme and excessive position of we are, you say we're going to create this protection shield of liability so that nothing comes even close to holding a woman responsible to what happens to her unborn child.
Yeah, and so I want to go to the cases that I see playing out because they make this correction, they amend the bill, and then, when did this pass? It was into September. This became.
I believe it passed in August. It was just signed last week.
Oh,
by
just
the
signed.
governor.
Oh, so the governor has like a month to sit on a bill before he signs it in California?
It's basically a deadline at the end of September for.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Our state's a lot different. So this thing has become law, but in the versions of the bill, at one point it's like literally you could kill a kid and not be prosecuted. At this point, and I think you alluded to before, I could see this botched attempt. Let's say a woman tries taking the abortion pill, which I believe is like readily available. They send them to like teenage children if they want it, without even parent approval. I'm sure in California it's even worse. And they have a botched abortion, which is good, right? Life exists, and the baby's killed. So can this woman then with a living baby just allow that baby to starve to death? And how would that even play out in a hospital? If this was done in a hospital, could she say, don't feed the baby, we're not going to take care of the baby, and allow it could no one be prosecuted in this case?
I think you're raising a lot of the questions that a lot of us wonder about, is what this exactly would look like. And I can tell you one thing, that if a hospital had concerns or suspicions about, the death of a child, the death of a young child, they would be very cautious. They would have to be very cautious about voicing those suspicions, investigating anything about it, about the cause of death, because they themselves could be liable for doing so, for simply investigating the cause of death of a newborn child. So as to how this will play out, I think, unfortunately, it will play out in tragic scenarios that we may never even hear about, simply because the law makes it so that it's dangerous for public authorities to investigate.
Gotcha. Are you guys going to stay on top of this issue? Life Legal Defense Fund, that's your foundation, the name of the organization?
Oh, yeah, you betcha.
LLDF.org or lifelegaldefensefoundation.org. Is that two websites they can go to?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Katie, for joining us. Very interesting stuff. I know this is going to come into play in the next year. California's got a huge population, but I pray that we don't see a case, but I mean, what are the odds of that, right?
And from one Californian to the other, Katie, thank you for everything you're doing, and please keep up the fight, because we need people like you doing that kind of work, exposing these monsters.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, this is the thing, the politics of it, Noah. We are led to believe that the Democrats just win on abortion, right? And, of course, it rallies their base. There's no doubt about it. Their base is full of people that really believe that you can just kill a baby. I mean, some would argue, and as you mentioned, that case in Virginia, to even past birth, right? Mm-hmm. But certainly the Democrats believe you can kill a baby up to birth. A 7-pound baby inside the mother, who could be born at any hour, can still be killed if the mother doesn't want it. That to me is such an extreme position. So I think if you put 10 independent voters in a room and you said, hey, on one side, the Republicans, okay, they think life begins at conception, which is probably a pretty mainstream position in the Republican Party. And once that life begins, then there's no exceptions for that, because it's, a human life. And why would you exempt anything? What does the origins matter in the end? Because then could you kill a fully grown adult who had that origin, right? So once you define when life begins, you have to protect it. Or the left's position, the Democrats' position, which states that you can kill a baby that's 7 pounds, 8.5 months inside the mother's womb. I got to imagine most independents are like, yeah, that's the extreme position. That's a baby. That's a human life. Am I wrong on that?
I don't think you're wrong, and I think the polling comes up in our defense with that. I mean, it's not that they're even right wing. You have plenty of people who are very left wing. Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, these people who are like, it's insanity that they're promoting infanticide, that they're letting us just say it's okay to kill an 8-9-month-old baby. I mean, myself, I was a preemie. I came out before babies that get aborted
You
are.
must have been the world's largest preemie. What were you, like 10 pounds when you came out?
10 pounds, 2 ounces.
You were not. I just totally made that up. You were 10 pounds?
10 pounds, 2 ounces.
Wait, how? Well, how do we find these people, Dawson? Well, how early were you?
6 weeks.
6 weeks early, and you weighed 10 pounds, 2 ounces?
23.5 inches long. Spencer's breed 'em big.
Oh, okay. So, oh my God. I keep saying 7 pounds because that's like the average baby in my example here. You know, Democrats think, you know, you at 10 pounds, 2 ounces could have been killed.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I was a teen child, right? My mom was a teenager when she conceived me. I never had a dad from biological birth. And I grew up in poverty, $5,000 a year. I had meat
I know none of this story,
Thursdays.
by the way. I'm learning this firsthand. So how old was your mother when she had you?
19 when she got pregnant, 20 2 months before I was born.
All right.
So
That's like the category of people that would choose to have an abortion, right? So thank
literally,
God.
we had $5,000 a month growing up. We had meat Thursdays. By every metric on paper, I was that poor kid that would be better off dead. When my mom went in to go see if she was pregnant, get tested, they tried to have her sign the papers to get an abortion because they would get more money for that service. So it is deplorable, and why I'm fired up about this issue is because these people are saying the world would be better if you were dead, and everyone like you as well. It's not human, it's not charitable, and it's not empathetic.
Well, that's what really bugs me about this issue is it's like, to me, it's the big moral issue. When you bring up slavery, that was the moral issue of the day, right? And it took a long time to sort out, and I think that's going to be the same thing with abortion, where I think the abortion issue really resides, because we as a country have to decide something. We have to decide when life begins, okay? You got two different sides of the political aisle, and I won't say that's Democrat and Republican, because that's what they want you to believe, but you have the pro-life and the pro-abortion groups, okay? And one doesn't want to define life at all. They don't want to define life. But you have to define life at some point, right? And most people recognize that life does begin before birth because, you know, you got a 10-pound, 2-ounce baby there who is 8, so that'd be 7.5 weeks or 7.5 months. That is a human life. He survived. He was born early and survived. That's a human life. So we have to define when life begins as a society, and it seems like the only honest people, you know, entering this discussion is those from the pro-life camp that say conception. And of course there's the 20-week bills, right? Which is a process to try to define life, but we have to do it at some point.
And I mean, if you zoom out, we're being charitable. It's not that, like, I think that we're right when we say that life begins at conception, but we're just saying, here's my position, put up your position, let's have an argument about it. But the reality is the left can't ever talk about when life begins. They can never have a time or a date when it begins, because as soon as they're willing to have that conversation, they have ceded ground to us. And now it's no longer a discussion of if, but when, because now we have a range that we can operate in. So they're never going to say that it's ever a murder. They're always going to say, oh, you know, it's the woman's right. And they're playing it smart because that's the only narrative position they can win.
Well, and the reason we brought this up today is because abortion, whether you like it or not, is getting discussed. You know, this has been part of the questions in every debate, so it's being discussed. So it's not like it's an issue you can just ignore. If you read the remainder of the leaked image GOP talking points, well, actually, I got that up here. It goes on to say, Since abortion is not on the ballot, let's talk about the ongoing issues that affect Minnesotans every day: crime, inflation, the economy, and education. Which I don't like that response, and I've heard a lot of can't say that. It's just like, oh, well, you're like basically ignoring what people want to talk about, the voters, the people that you're trying to earn a vote from. And it's not just the left, it's also the right. There are a lot of people on the pro-life side that are doing good work, and they would like this issue. They would like to talk about it. But politics is more about exposing your opponent, the extreme positions they have. And I think the people on the right, the Republicans, have got to stop playing this damn defense every single time. On this issue, it's going to get brought up. You go right back at them and you say these people want to kill full-term babies, 7 pounds, 8.5 months old.
Yeah,
that's an extreme position. That's what my opponent believes. They want to talk about my position, which I think I'm actually defining life. I think we need to define life, but they want to kill a full-grown baby inside the womb.
Yeah. You don't back down. You double down whenever they confront you on this issue. And the reality is, the left is not the only one that uses abortion as a cash cow. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of rhinos that use abortion as a cash cow, and then you can see where their loyalties really lie, from the fact that the MNGOP itself put out that weak, limp-wristed cowardice statement, saying, "Oh, it's a constitutional right." But I guess what? If the Democrats stay in power and we have 2024 coming up, they're going to be banging their chest like a war drum saying, "We stand for life, we stand for life," and it's because they want the money. They want your money, and they don't want to ever actually achieve the goals you care about, because that's not profitable for them.
Yeah, I always do kind of wonder about that stuff. You seem to have some much more certain positions than I do here, Noah. But yeah, I do kind of wonder that. Do either side ever want this issue to be resolved? But I do think it's the largest moral issue of our time. I equate to slavery. This thing needs to be decided, and one side doesn't even want to come to the table and define when life begins. And you're right about that. That's exactly why they don't want to, because then they think they're conceding ground, ceding ground, and then we can't have an actual honest public conversation about this that will eventually lead to policy.
That's the same.
And then we're left in the areas like California where, well, anything counts. Even if that baby's born, we can allow it to die if its intent was to be aborted.
Yeah, and that's the game that they played on us to get us all, income taxed by the government. We were going no taxation, and then they said, what about 15%? We said, that's ridiculous, 10%. And then they fooled us into, now we're all paying taxes, even though the original position was, we don't. They used that Overton window argument we were talking about earlier, where they lob something insane and radical all the way down the field, and then they make it halfway there, and it's considered a compromise, even though they literally just gained ground. And that's why they're never going to address the "is it murder? When does life begin?" issue, because they can see it's as soon as they take a step on that field, they're in the game, and they don't want to even play it.
Gotcha. I want to pivot to the other big story in Minnesota. It's actually getting a little bit of play. It's this Feeding Our Fraud scandal. Now, you were in California for the last, it was a month, right?
Yeah, about a month.
I know you don't work for me, but it's like I still get to see you somewhat regularly, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we don't have Noah in our lives anymore because you're hiding in California, camping, living off the grid, and miscellaneous projects.
Yeah.
So, are you aware of what happened on this scandal?
I have been brought up to speed, and I was laughing at how just appalling it is that this could happen right under our noses.
Is anyone even shocked on this thing? We got negligent people at the state. Governor Walz, who we talked about in this program last week, lied about when he knew about it, and that he also lied about the judge. What is it, Guthman, who forcing them to actually make the payments to feeding our fraud. Dawson, why don't you pull up the tweet here from the state auditor candidate Ryan Wilson's press conference yesterday. So Ryan Wilson, cool guy, running for state auditor, submitted a data practice request today seeking records held by state auditor Julie Blaha, Miss Whiteclaw, right? If you don't know that story, you got to look up Julie Blaha and the White Claw. Related to her involvement in the failure to halt $250 million in taxpayer dollars from being fraudulently taken in the Feeding Our Future scandals. Scroll down here. I think there's a whole series of tweets. There you go. You got to love Twitter. In the 8 months since the scandal broke, Auditor Blaha has failed to provide Minnesotans with an explanation as to how this financial scandal occurred. Doubling down on her silence, Blaha, Miss Whiteclaw, has not answered why she failed to raise the Feeding Our Future issue in her audit report to the federal government. As the only constitutional officer with the duty to oversee government spending, Auditor Blaha had a special responsibility to the public to help stop this fraud. In emails previously obtained from the Office of the State Auditor, top officials were not aware of the Feeding Our Fraud scandal. This contradicts Auditor Blaha's contention in response to missing flags in a report she signed off on, that she hadn't missed them but was in communication with the Minnesota Department of Education on the issue. Blaha's explanation that she didn't want to duplicate efforts to find and stop the fraud because it would be a waste of taxpayer dollars rings hollow. Nearly $200 million associated with Feeding Our Fraud appears to have been distributed after Blaha had an opportunity to help halt the fraud. You can go to the rest of this here on Twitter just to learn more about it. But essentially, yeah, what did she know? Like, the auditor position, well, first of all, all the main Democrats, because this actually spans, I think Steve Simon's the only one that's maybe in the clear on this one, if I got this right. So Walz, as governor, it's his commissioner, his Department of Education, that's the one that actually started payments again to this fraudulent scheme. The Attorney General's office is the one that actually represents Minnesota Department of Education in court, because they represent government agencies. And then the state auditor is the damn position that's supposed to audit the money, right? And she's talking about, well, I didn't want to waste taxpayer money when there's a lot of taxpayer money being wasted on this fraudulent program that Governor Walz himself says he knew about.
I guess her investigation must have cost $201 million then, right? Over the money that they lost. I mean, to say this is incompetence is quite merciful. This is beyond incompetence. This is malicious. You don't, whoopsie, $200 million. Just like, the U.S. government didn't just, we can't find the several $trillion that's gone after during the 2001, 2002, war effort that we started up. The government acts like, how did that happen? Where'd the money go? Not realizing that we are aware of how much bullcrap is going on, and that $200 million. Do the math. How much is that per Minnesotan, right? That's several days worth of meals that you could have had that is now vanished into thin air.
Well, I think the Democrats, who have definitely opened that abortion's issue, and once again, we laid out the roadmap for the Republicans, take on this issue when it gets brought up. Because, listen, polling shows that most people care about crime and inflation first, okay? That's very obvious to most of us, but abortion is being brought up, so fight back at how extreme they are when it comes up. But, these Democrats, like Tim Walz, they're like, oh, God, no, why is this coming up in October? We just need abortion. We need abortion till the end of October, until November. And then we got that little grace period I just learned about. Facebook doesn't allow you to advertise. Did you see that? Yeah, William shared that with us. It's crazy. So we'll let all the cards be on the table at that point because there's no longer Facebook advertising. But we'll just hope that this sticks with people, this abortion issue. And now they got to answer for this fraud. And the question I have is, so why did Governor Walz lie? That's the big question. Why did he lie about the governor or the judge forcing him to pay it? And how politically connected was this fraud? Because we learned that a lot of these Democrats received funds from these fraudsters, and this was a really interesting revelation we learned about. Why don't you pull up the transcripts? Some people in the media are kind of doing their job now, late in the game, but listen, once again, there's a lot of October left here. There's a transcript of court cases, and zoom in on that real quick, that there's some state legislators, it says right here we got highlighted, this is the Council for Feeding Our Fraud. And they're referring to a feeding site, which is called the House of Refuge Outreach. We got a call from a state representative asking us to help this particular nonprofit or organization in Minneapolis participate in the food program. We got a personal phone call from a state rep saying, "Can you help?" Our organization said yes. So who is a state rep? Now, I don't know if this House Reach, what is that called? What was that called? House of Refuge? House of Refuge Outreach. I looked up. I don't know. I don't think anyone from their higher-ups were part of this indictment. So maybe they're in the clear. But once again, somebody's politically connected with Feeding Our Future, a state legislator, right? People are getting these. You think some of these people are getting kickbacks because they're getting these campaign donations. Clearly, they're very active in the lobbying of Feeding Our Future to get funds. I'm like, man, is there a bigger story here? We're just like, was it October 4th? This is interesting. We got 34 days to election to learn more about this.
And I mean, you can watch how the Democrats will speak out of both sides of their mouths, because in one breath they'll say we need to let women kill their babies up to birth, and in the other breath they say, but if they survive, you have to pay to feed them, and we won't even feed them, even if you pay us. It's ridiculous. They don't have. I mean, this is why it's foolish to kind of look for it, right? They have no consistent train of logic. It doesn't matter if their positions make sense. It only matters if it wins them elections.
No, that's true, and that's what they're in the business of doing, is staying in power, right? And control over you and me. All right, lots to digest there. I hope you learned something. I really appreciate our guest. That was pretty cool.
She was excellent.
Yeah, anyone from California that has a clear mind, because that's a rarity these days. Seems like a lot of those people have left. They moved to like Texas or Florida. Or Idaho, right? Isn't that where your northern guys are fleeing to? Is Idaho?
Yeah, that's where a lot of us are going. I have some family friends and whatnot that have fled to Idaho. I mean, I understand why, but also I have to make sure I have the at least some anti-democratic stickers on my car when I drive through that state, so I don't get pulled over or run off the road by a reasonably and understandably angry Idahoan.
I would empathize with them. All right, thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and we'll be back here shortly with more cutting news.